But if I can just ask the panelists to please just give me, in the oil and gas industry, what the roles of your organizations are and what it is that you contribute to the industry. If I can ask to start with you, Mr. Memano Mulunga.
My name is Manuel Mulunga. I'm the managing director of NAMCO. NAMCO is a national oil company of Namibia, NOC. We are an integrated oil company, meaning we operate in the upstream space of the oil and gas industry and also the downstream space. Upstream space is what.
Okay, yeah, thank you. The upstream space is what Richard was talking about, really that talks about oil and gas exploration and production, while the downstream space is relating to the trading and distribution of petroleum products. So we operate in that space. We've seen the various NAMCO service stations and then national oil storage facility that we operate. So that's the downstream space. There's also what we call the midstream space, which deals with the refining and transportation of fuel. We don't really participate there yet, but we are an integrated oil company that operates in the upstream and the downstream, and we are basically owned by the state, 100% by the state, and we are the state's vehicle, obviously, to participate in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm always happy when I come to NUST. Once upon a time, it was called the Polytechnic of Namibia, and I'm a very proud alumni to be back. So if you don't know, I graduated from NUST a long time ago, in 1996, so I can proudly say. Now, Petrofund was established by the government in 1992 in anticipation for the conversation that we are currently having today, which is in the event that the country discovers oil, are we going to have the human capacity to deploy in the industry? So our government had the foresight to establish an entity that would assist to build the necessary capacity for the oil and gas industry. The Petroleum Exploration and Production Act, particularly Section 14, provides for our Honorable Minister to engage operators to make contributions to the government, to enable the government to build capacity. Our board is represented by key sectors in the industry. My colleague here on the left, Mr. Mulunga, NAMCOR, serves on the board. The Minister of Education serves on the board. And my good colleague on the right here, both from NAMPOA, they also serve on the board. So it's a board that has skills that we would require to engage in discussions that will assist us to build capacity for the oil and gas industry. We have 4 programs that we've been running since the fund was established in 1992. The program, which is very well known, is the undergraduate and scholarship program. That program has about 3 legs to it. The first one is a program that we manage ourselves, which has an undergraduate leg as well as a postgraduate leg. We also have joint scholarships. We have a joint scholarship with NAMCOR, where we assist in building internal capacity for the national oil company. We also have a joint scholarship with the Ministry of Mines and Energy, also serving the same purpose. We've also had a joint scholarship with the Chevening Scholarship Program, where we, as the industry, collaborate with them. Once we identify skills that we require, we jointly train with the Chevening Scholarship Program. We recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, introduced a secondary school scholarship program in the program. We also have 2 others that I'd like to share with you tonight. They are particularly for those that have graduated with master's degrees with various skills for the oil and gas industry. It's an offshore survival funded program. And lastly, we've got an MSc petroleum internship funded program. These are my introductory words, and I'll share with you more information as we continue this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert Mwanachilenga, and I'm the General Manager for NUST Energy Namibia. We are a subsidiary of a company called NUST Africa, which is Canadian-based, listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange and Toronto Stock Exchange. We have licenses in Botswana and Namibia in the recently discovered Kavango Delta, which we discovered onshore Namibia. Our license number is number 73. And last year, we embarked on a drilling campaign of 2 wells. If I can step back a bit, we got our license in 2015 and only started the drilling campaign in 2021 last year. As my colleague Bridget said, the oil industry is long. You have to study, it's intensive, but very rewarding if you discover. So we had 2 wells last year, and we discovered oil in both the wells, not commercial, but good oil, proving that there is a petroleum system in the Kavango Basin of Namibia. So we have a petroleum system there. We acquired a lot of seismic also at the same time, and seismic was explained also, so I don't need to explain that. So we understood the area much, much better now, and we are currently undertaking a 4-well drilling campaign. We are drilling 4 wells, and we started one last week, the first one of the 4, and it's very interesting. So we are very excited. And one other thing I would like to say before I pass the microphone is that I'm very happy to see a lot of youth here, a lot of students, because our prayer is that the oil industry becomes not the only future, but participate highly. And you are the guys to run it. You had 40 years maximum of production. So it's you guys who are going to take over this industry. And fingers crossed, I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Hello there. Once again, I'm Bridget Denner, Vice Chair of NAMPOA, which is our industry association. I think I explained what the role of NAMPOA was in our talk. I'm also, as part of my day job, the General Manager for ExxonMobil. We're at the very left side of that upstream petroleum cycle. Our technical team is currently interpreting a seismic survey, trying to figure out if we have those traps and if we have oil or gas. Thank you.
The ministry, our biggest role really is to make sure that we do get investors to come invest. That's really what it is. Make sure that at least we got the legal framework that is really well understood. Make sure that you don't have a system where today is this, tomorrow is the other, and therefore people don't know exactly what it is you are doing. So that's really our role. And I think in that, the biggest one, of course, is the licensing. How do we license the investors? How do they get their licenses? Our system, unlike other countries, our system is an open licensing system. In other words, the whole country is actually divided into oil blocks. I think it was done in the early 90s. So if you look on the map, on the oil and gas map, actually the whole country is divided into blocks. And that is available. Anybody who they can actually just come and apply to us. And the law obviously says for us to assess you and give you that license, at least you have to prove 2 things. At least you know what you're going to do. You must have some skills. You must have some technical skills, how to do exploration. Otherwise, even if I give it to you, what are you going to do with it? Number 2, you need also to show that at least you do have some money to be able to do the exploration. Otherwise, again, what are you going to do with their licenses? But it's really an open system. In other countries, what they actually do, they have got an auction system. So which means they will take a block, maybe a couple of blocks, and then they put them on auction. and people then bid for those spots. But ours is open licensing system. But as I said, really ours we to make sure that we have got the conducive environment in which investors can come in, and also when they come in now, for example, now that we got oil, we are going to make sure that they pay their due. So they're not going to get away with it. So we need to make sure that you pay the tax which you must pay, the royalty you must pay. That's our role to make sure that that happens. So it's quite a big role. So if we don't collect all that money, then we can't blame anybody else than the Minister of Mines and Energy, because we must collect it. Between the Minister of Mines and Energy and obviously Treasury are the ones actually who receive all the revenue. So that's what I can say.
Thank you very much. What is the difference between exploration, appraisal, and production activities, if there are any? And also, just how do we need to understand the different stages in which Namibia is at now? Mr. Mwanachilenga, Mr. Mulunga, if I can ask you to please just share on that.
Thank you for inviting NAMCO to this event. I'm really privileged to be here and to participate in this dialogues and these discussions. I think as Bridget was saying earlier, the oil and gas has a life cycle for value chain. And you start off with, obviously, exploration phase. Usually when the minister gives us a license, it's an exploration license, which entitles you to do certain activities. And one of those activities is the seismic activities that you have to undertake, which are obviously not as expensive as the wells. And then you do your exploration drilling, which is basically taking a rig, whether it's onshore or offshore, to drill a well, several kilometers into the ground through the sea if you are doing it offshore, to basically determine whether there is any hydrocarbon accumulation in the license. And then once you do that and you make a discovery, like what we've done now with Shell and Total, because making a discovery in itself does not give you an idea of how much oil there is. So you have to go into the next phase to appraise basically what you have found. So appraisal just means you're appraising to find out what's the volume of the resources you have. So that's what we're currently doing. That's the phase that we are in. So both ourselves and our partners, Shell and Total, I think in the third quarter of this year, September, October, we'll start with an appraisal program to drill another 5 wells or so, basically to determine how much oil is likely to be lying in those license areas. And obviously, once you successfully do your appraisal program, you will then make a final investment decision, knowing how much there is, proving the commerciality, and then you drill several development wells, which will cost you a lot of money to get yourself ready to produce that oil. So production is really just the extraction of the oil from the ground.
I think just to talk to the students, the oil industry is a multifaceted industry, meaning that we've got a lot of different professions, specializations in it. We've got engineers, we've got different types of engineers, reservoir engineers, drilling engineers, production engineers, chemical engineers, we've got accountants, geoscientists. So it's a very wide industry, and we're very happy that at least we can use that talent from such a wide industry just to be specific to our industry and to solve our problems, which is something very good.
Thank you. When it comes to the oil and gas exploration activities onshore, there is a lot of talk about environmental degradation from a proprietor. So from a proprietor and government partner and regulatory point, how is the protection of the environment ensured? Honourable Minister?
As I said in my remarks, to say, obviously, this highly technical environment, there's no doubt that the activities to be undertaken will have an impact on the environment. There's just no doubt that. And we, as a government, are aware of that, and that is why even if you look at the Namibian constitution, it talks about the environmental management. It's probably the few constitutions that talks about environmental. The Namibian constitution talks about how we need to manage, how to protect the environment. Other countries don't have that. They obviously have two laws, but ours, not only do we have a management, Environmental Management Act that is under the Ministry of Environment to make sure that all the activities, all the drillings, there has to be, number one, there's always a permit, but that permit given to you is contingent upon you having produced an environmental management plan. For example, either it's going to be because people are afraid, for example, if it's onshore, people are afraid that you are going to contaminate the water, and therefore the water drilling permit has to be given by the Ministry of Environment of Water. But that is again just contingent on you first having to produce that environmental management plan, which the government then will scrutinize. If we are satisfied that yes, this is really minimize the risk, only then you actually permit it then to proceed. And that is really what is important. But the idea to say because it's got an environmental impact and let us not do anything at all, that's what I'm saying. That's actually not really a just discussion. But yes, let's insist on the fact that all the companies that are doing this work, all of them, they are subjected to the highest standard of environmental management, and where it's found not up to standards, we simply do not actually allow them to proceed. And I think that's what we've been doing. And so far, I have to say, we have not seen any of the companies there where they found it difficult to actually to come up with those. I think in most of all these companies, these are internationally recognized companies. And environmental management is part of what they have to do, even where they come from. But obviously, we don't want to rely only because of that, but we do have our own system where they have to get a permit on every activity that they're doing to make sure that we do take care of the environment.
I'm an onshore operator, and I've worked onshore in West Africa, Angola, and Soyo, Cabinda. I've also worked onshore in Germany, a field called in Emsland, a field called Bramberg, where we drilled onshore wells. As companies, all companies, we subscribe to international best practice in almost everything we do, if not everything. Part of the thoughts is, of course, we're drilling through aquifers, water aquifers, to get to the 3 kilometers down there where we find our resources. So how do we do with the aquifer, water aquifer, for example, the minister mentioned that, we have proven technology, which is always improving, and we design our wells so much so that there is zero possibility of any of the internal part to mix with the aquifer around it. We have casing, and we cement it, and we pressurize it to make sure that that is going to happen. And in other countries where there's been onshore production, we've had production for even 100 years. I went to a wedding in the US, 100 years producing, no problem. There are animals around, people are farming around. So we subscribe to total quality and best practice in the industry. And that is in almost everything that we do. We are onshore operators, so to reach to our drill locations, we need to construct the roads to go there. We also do everything in high standards. So to make the long story short, I think there is no need for really concern, because the industry has proven itself that it can handle a lot of things. There are a few bad examples, yes, we know about them, but that's another story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mola Chilenga. Just before we close it off, Mr. Mulunga is a partner in all the exploration licenses. How do you, from a partner point of view, especially as a representative of government, make sure that the entities ensure that there is environmental protection throughout these exploration activities?
We, as a national company, of course, is in a very unique position because we are owned by the state, and we obviously have to make sure that we carry the interests of the state forward in all these exploration activities. And we ourselves are a corporate citizen. We are a company, and we are a commercial company. So we are a 10% equity holder in these licenses. So it is in our interest as a Namibian entity to make sure that the environment is protected all the time. And as the Honorable Minister is saying, Namibia is one of those few countries that has the protection of the environment in its constitution. So we take that seriously, and we participate obviously during the exploration activities with our partners through TAC meetings and OCA meetings and so on. So we are very much aware of what is going on, and we do give our inputs where necessary, just to make sure that indeed the operator sort of keeps to the protection of the environment, and they work according to the environmental management plan that has been approved by the Ministry of Environment Resources.
Thank you very much.
I think the question is, for me, I know the companies are quite well aware, and they got high standards of how they also want to protect the environment. But we cannot rely on self-monitoring. Bridget would tell me, don't worry, we have discovered. Robert would tell me the same, they would tell me. But it's really, as government, how do we make sure that actually people, when they give you that environmental management plan, do they really pay attention to that? Do they really live up to that? And that's our responsibility, whether it's the Minister of Mines and Energy, or whether the Minister of Agriculture and Water, or whether it's the Minister of Environment. That is our responsibility. Not because we don't trust them, but sometimes how things can go. So it's really our responsibility as a government to make sure that the plan is really well crafted and is monitored, and that's what we need to do.
Maybe you can just give us a picture of the investment that has gone into offshore so far, and why. I know that you alluded to that previously in your presentation. Why does the appetite seem to still be there for offshore oil and gas exploration, in light of the investment that has gone into it, and where we're still now at a point that we have not entered production stage yet?
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned in the presentation, Namibia went for many decades of drilling exploration wells with absolutely no success. And as you saw, over $30 billion was spent over that period of time. So it is a very expensive industry to try to be successful at. Certainly, one of the reasons that we keep on with it is that the fundamentals of both the onshore and the offshore in terms of the geology is out there for the potential to have commercial oil and gas. And certainly the results from Recon Africa, from Shell and Total earlier this year are signs of that encouragement. But probably most importantly is that energy is critical for human society's growth. Access to energy is what promotes life and prosperity for the growing global population. Energy demand is increasing. Our population worldwide is increasing, and the demand for energy is increasing. So there is a need for oil and gas to be that affordable and reliable energy source through this transition period of time. And that's really why we do that, to help promote energy access for the world as well. And we can do that by balancing this, the need for reducing emissions and greenhouse gas. It's not an either or. We can do both at the same time.
Thank you very much. And I think I'll just have a follow-up question to that. Companies have now really started looking at including the environmental social governance into their way of doing business, especially in this industry. Can you say that in a modern day exploration, there should be still entities that don't have an ESG approach to business? Would you say that we can still, it should become a requirement for an oil and gas company or an entity in the industry to not have an ESG approach to business?
Well, I think it's imperative that they have an ESG approach to business. If they don't have care and concern for the environment, then they shouldn't be in business. You know, we're all human beings too. We all want to see our societies prosper and live safe and healthy lives. We don't want to destroy the world per se. So it's an absolute imperative for finding ways to reduce emissions and have less impact on the environment. Certainly, I think you're seeing over the last number of years, all of the major oil companies have promoted efforts to find ways to decrease emissions, either through things like carbon capture or you know, kind of low carbon plastics, research into biofuels and alternate energy sources. So I think we can do both, and it's important that we all pull together to do both things.
Now, I think the students would be very interested in hearing from Mrs. Mulemi about this. The industry is quite technical, and we've seen this with the language that is used. We also see with the people who operate in it. And there's always fear that the industry is parachuting or will parachute expats to do the technical work, and then the locals are left to do some odd jobs. As Petrofund, what is the organization doing in terms of capacity?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll draw on the presentations of Bridget and Robert, as well as Mulunga to some extent. The industry has three distinct stages, and Bridget has done a good job in highlighting those. I'll just mention them because I'm interacting with students. We have the upstream sector, the midstream sector, and lastly the downstream sector. Now, when you're trained, you respond to the sector that the industry is in. We've been made to understand that for a large part of our history in hydrocarbons, Namibia has really remained in the exploration sector. Now, within exploration, as Mulunga has explained, you also find some segments there. You first and foremost deal with exploration, then appraisal, you move to field development, and you can end up into production, and lastly, after a long time, after 40, 20 years, depending on how long we are producing, you'll be looking at decommissioning. Now, Namibia has been in the exploration sector, like I said, for quite a bit of time. So the skills that we have developed have responded to that sector. I'm very happy today, and I decided to just take some time to analyze the data that we have, that I can share with the students that are in the audience today, possibly stimulate you to take an interest in some of the skills that the industry offers. We've largely trained petroleum geoscientists, and amongst these, we've trained exploration geophysicists. We've also trained micropaleontologists. We've trained oil and gas GIS specialists, oil and gas data management, and oil and gas chemists. We've also trained a few petroleum engineers, and amongst this pool of graduates, we have reservoir engineers, production engineers, marine engineers, and there's a talk a lot about the environment, and I'm pleased that the minister has highlighted that environment is a matter that is very key to the oil and gas industry. Not only the oil and gas industry, it's all of us that live on the planet. We have to look after it. We've also trained oil and gas environmental managers in response to ensuring that as a country we can do our own monitoring of the environment when we have operations like we are currently busy with. We've also trained oil and gas economists, oil and gas lawyers, oil and gas accountants, oil and gas cyber security experts, as well as, very important, you need to manage the oil and gas resource when you discover it. We've also trained oil and gas taxation experts that are deployed in the Ministry of Finance. Now, the question to be asked is, now that we have discovered what happens next, this is a conversation that I've been in the industry for a long time. I've been excited to have that conversation because it moves me from exploration to the next stage of the industry, which is appraisal, hopefully field development, and finally some production. Now, what have we done? We've recognized that as a result of the recent announcements for discoveries, it's about time that we now start talking about how we should get ready to have the skills we need for the new sector of the industry. We have been consulting with our peers within the industry so that we can come up with a workforce development plan that responds to the field development and hopefully production aspect of the industry. I thought I should also share with you some of the skills that we are looking at developing. These will typically skills that will develop out of our TVET programs in the country. We'll be looking at skills such as oil and gas drillers, roughnecks, very interesting names, roustabouts. We'll be looking at derrickmen. We'll be looking at motormen. You've been made to understand that the discoveries that we have are offshore. By the way, the minister mentioned about how far away from land it is. It's ultra deep. It's more than 200 kilometers offshore Namibia. So we will need helicopter pilots. We will need paramedics. We will need all sorts of skills. I'm just giving you a flavor of the skills that we are going to need going forward. This is very important for us, so we are busy engaging with all key stakeholders so that we can get ready. This is what I can comment in terms of what we have trained for exploration and what programs we have in place to train for the new emerging industry, which is field development and hopefully the exciting part, which is production.
Thank you very much.
Let me just something on the skills. But first, when you ask Bridget the question to say, why do you keep doing what you're doing? And her answer was like, oh, we need to make sure there's the energy, which is human development. But she also forgot to say, also make money for the shareholders. I mean, there is money to be made. That's why we do this. I mean, that's just what it is. But in the process, of course, part of human development. On the skills, you know, there's always this thing about us as Africans. We forever think we don't have the skills. The longest of time, if you go to Nigeria now, Nigeria have discovered oil in 1956. They will probably be talking about the same thing, how they don't have the skills. If you go to Angola now, they're probably going to tell about how they don't have skills. There is something fundamentally wrong the way we perceive ourselves and what we can do. Nilian talked about what Petrofund did and all the people trained. But we still want to argue to say we do not have the skills. I can understand how, obviously, you know, it's one thing to train at a university or a TVET. It's another to do the work itself. But why forever are we in this perpetual thing of like, we do not have the skills? And it's not only the oil industry. You go to any another, even on the IT, people will say we don't have IT skills. I'm like, but NUST keep producing IT people. Where do they go? So I think sometimes also the self-belief, the way we do not want to believe that my skills are good enough. And when we want to have an IT system, I rather want to go and get from Mauritius and not actually ask somebody from who qualified from NUST and say, can you build this system for me? Really, I think we need to also change our way of thinking in terms of our own capability. I'm not undermining the fact that you need to have on-the-job training for you to understand. But we are the one who suddenly we tell people like how we don't have the skills. And if I am Shell, obviously I don't want people to come and work on my system who don't have skills. And you have told me, you have confirmed you don't have the skills. Then I'm going to insist that no, wait a minute. I'm not going to actually let's build the skills first. So it's true, we need to build that, but honestly, we do have most of the skills. Fundamentally, we do have those skills. But we can retrain and get people to really understand what it is. But if you are in this mode of like, for always need more skills and more skills, we never actually get the skills, but the skills are there. I just want to actually admit.
Right to ensure that the country and all its citizens benefits equally from the production of natural resources, hydrocarbons in this instance. And also, the future of the industry looks very, very bright. Is Namibia ready for production? Honorable, maybe we can start with you.
Did you say the future looks bright? Oh, okay. The future looks bright. I would agree with that. I think really for the longest time we were concerned that we don't seem to have good economic news in terms of where are we looking at in terms of economic growth, and I think this is really an opportunity. Not only on the oil and gas, also you have followed the green hydrogen discussion. That's actually got another potential, really, really great potential, because green hydrogen is the future energy which everybody needs. And in fact, when I was saying there's no contradiction in us embracing both, it's true. In fact, we are probably as a country going to actually reach net zero the fastest, because we might be producing fossil fuel, but we're actually even producing more of the renewable energy. And therefore, we're going to actually reach the net zero very, very quick. So I think what we really need to do, as I was saying, it's really for us to understand the potential impact on the economy, and therefore, am I ready to be able to do that? And I think by the time we actually start discussing this local content policy, I think that will probably highlight to people much more than what it is, and therefore to put yourself in a position where how to be ready. Because as I say, some services are very simple; they can be provided as soon as possible. Some are really more complex, and therefore you need to have a system. How do you then make sure that we are ready? Between the entrepreneurs, the business people, and us as a government, we need to find a way where you need to be ready over a certain time period. What will the government role be in that, and what will be the producer's role, which I also believe they must have a.
There's two things that are top of my mind that Namibia could be doing to preparing itself. The minister in his opening comments alluded to one of these, and that is to diversify the economy. As he mentioned, the government recently established this sovereign wealth fund, and that's going to be very key for taking the revenue that could be generated from future production and use it to make strategic investments to help diversify the economy. Oil and gas isn't going to be around forever, and so diversification is going to be critical in order for long-term growth of Namibia. And then the second thing, and he's also alluded to this, is the local content development, both workforce development and supplier development. And this is something that's really a shared responsibility, not only with the oil companies, but also between governments and the communities around. certainly, our company has had a lot of experience with this. We had a recent discovery several years ago in Guyana that again was very similar to Namibia. It was a frontier region with no history of the oil and gas production. And in a period of 6 years, there's now thousands of people that are directly employed by our company and by our major contractors, and there are thousands of local suppliers. So it can be done. That was accomplished through very close cooperation with the Guyanese government, and I know personally that this ministry is very open and welcoming and very keen to engage on this topic. So I think it's something that can happen and be done very well here.
Is Namibia ready or not? That's the question. I think we are ready. We are ready, and for example, manpower. We've trained more than 300 students in different skills with Petrol. They are all around, and those can be put into, of course, training, understudy somebody to take over maybe in 5, 10 years time from now. So I think Namibia is ready. We could have issues maybe with regards to infrastructure. Those are good problems. We can put terminals, and that's good, put terminals, Walvish Bay, such places for us, refineries, such things. So I think all in all, Namibia is ready. I look at NAMCO, I'm a NAMCO employee. NAMCO has done very well. It has expanded, and really all that skill can be used in the industry. I think we're ready.
Thank you very much. A very good question, actually. I'll draw on what the minister says, that the success of any industry depends on the workforce, the readiness of the workforce to be deployed for the industry. And an industry as large as the oil and gas industry, the demand for skills is huge and diverse. Very happy, and just to assure the minister, we haven't had an engagement for a while. I think I'll exploit this opportunity just to share some of the statistics of what we have trained. We have trained in total, and these are actual numbers, 335 graduates that are deployed in the Namibian industry at the moment. Of these graduates, 163 were provided with master's degrees. Of the 163, 58 were provided with oil and gas specialization skills. Now, where are these people? And very happy to report that apart from one, all are in the country, and we know where they are exactly, each one of them, because we track them. And I'm not joking when I say that. So if you are interested in being trained by us, just know that you are not going to run away. Now, very happy to report that some of them have become very successful, and they are captains of this industry at the moment. 17 of them of exploration and production at NAMCO, apart from 1 or 2 are graduates of the Petrol Fund. I'm also happy to report, Minister, that the Directorate of Petroleum Affairs at the Ministry of Mines and Energy is also capacitated by the Petrol Fund. 12 of these graduates are with the Ministry of Mines and Energy. I'm also very pleased to report that some of the team members providing legal services, I'm sure you all know Shakwa Nyambe Incorporated, they are graduates of the Petrol Fund. And my good friend here on my right, Robert, with Recon Africa, has also employed some of the graduates. Some of the graduates you see commenting on the industry are very highly trained personnel who luckily benefited from the Petrofund programs. Where did we train them? We trained them just about everywhere. We looked for the best institutions in the world to train them. Locally, we trained most at NUST and at UNAM. Right now, we have 41 students that are currently studying at UNAM as I speak to you. We have 8 at NUST. We have a few at IUM. We have 3 in South Africa, and we have 6 in the UK at the moment. And we've got 20 in our secondary school scholarship program. That gives us a total of 88 Namibians that are currently on the Petrofund scholarship program. Now, how's the future where I'm sitting? Very, very bright. Because I know that if we have trained this many Namibians and all of them are in country, we cannot get it wrong if we go beyond where the industry was, which was exploration. I can tell you that finding jobs during exploration is very difficult because the opportunities are limited. Exploration interventions are very short-lived, they've got very short cycles. So to make sure that we retained all these graduates in the country was not easy. This is where we now developed programs like the funded internship program, where we, as the Petrofund, enticed employers to give internship opportunities to our graduates while we pay them. And we told our interns, this is your opportunity to sell yourself. I can tell you that it worked like magic, because most of them who were given funded internship were employed at the end of their programs. So, Minister, I'd like to assure you that if we've been this successful when we had no oil, and this is several years of that, I implore on all young people that are here and those that are not in this room, please share the information that we are going to have opportunities for training within the oil and gas industry. But I'd like to caution you, all the graduates that you are going to meet that were trained by us and many others will tell you that this industry requires a lot of discipline because it's an industry that places safety as a top priority. It's an industry that places the environment as a top priority. So if you would like to work in the industry, just bear in mind that these would be the key attributes that we'll be looking for. So we are very excited going forward.
I will make my contribution by trying to put these discoveries into context. As Bridget was saying, they made some huge discoveries in a South American country called Guyana, more than 10 billion barrels. Now, there are some industry observers that believe that Namibia might be in the same league or even probably more. But obviously those numbers will have to be verified by the appraisal program that we're currently doing. But yeah, when we made these discoveries in February, we commissioned a study by world known consulting company called Wood Mackenzie. And I just want to share some statistics with the audience just to, because this is no small matter, these are significant discoveries. I mean, that study actually concludes that after years of exploration, basically after 30 years of post-independence exploration, Namibia could find itself the third largest oil producer in sub-Saharan Africa within a decade. The Graph and Venus discoveries that we've made in orange patch offshore are amongst the top 20 global discoveries in the last decade. These discoveries will make huge contributions to our GDP. At the peak, about 2035 or so, they could add up to $5.6 billion. Not Namibian dollars, because in the oil industry we don't talk about Namibian dollars, we talk about USD. So yeah, it's going to contribute up to 5.6 billion US dollars per annum to state revenues. Okay. The initial estimates after these discoveries show that Graf and Venus have the potential to almost double the Namibian GDP by 2040 to close to 37 billion US dollars. So these are significant discoveries from an employment creation point of view. At its peak by 2028 or so, I think we should be able to employ about 3,600 additional people, direct jobs, indirect jobs as well. Again, the nice thing about Namibia is having made these discoveries now is that we can learn from others how they have done it over the past. So there are very good examples out there, oil and gas, production is not rocket science. So there are lessons out there how to do it and not how to do it. So I think we are well placed. I'm a positive person by nature, but I think where we are as a country, I think the timing of the discoveries are good. We've got the institutions in place. I think this is not a country where you would find the managing director of the national oil company being $1 billion or billionaire in US dollar terms. So those kind of things, would not happen. So with all this income and a population of 2.5 million people, government should be able to do a good job to make sure that its citizens actually have a good life and all these opportunities that the minister was talking about, local content, to make sure that young people like yourselves get yourself involved in the industry to make sure that you participate in all the myriad of services that will be required to make sure that the industry takes off. I mean, I personally predict that we will spend in the next 5 years between 10 to 20 billion US dollars in this economy. Obviously, most of it will not be spent here because it will be spent on engineering works, floating production systems. But I mean, even if you just take a small percentage of, say, 5% or 10% of the money remaining in the country, it's quite significant. So there's a lot of hope. I think some of us started in the oil industry. I think personally started off 27 years ago, when I was maybe some of your age. So it's not too late to start. It's a great opportunity that obviously the country has provided. So yeah, you should take up the challenge and make sure that you participate in this industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening to the panel, and now I'd like to appreciate the panelists and NUST for organizing an event of this nature. As there are not much, we got to learn a lot. Just shortly, my question is an uncomfortable one. My father raised me to sometimes have the uncomfortable questions because we have to deal with certain things. Now we have some evil looming amongst us, something that we do not desire at all, but unfortunately that is a reality in our country, and that is the question of tribalism. My question is derived from a problem that was as a cause of oil discovery in the Niger Delta, where we have the Igoni and the Ijo tribes that have been battling with the government of Nigeria as their
areas of ancestry or their ancestral land where oil was discovered on that land, and they have found themselves in the position of being exploited and not being rewarded as this discovery was within their lands. Now, when we're talking about the area of discovery within the south or even within the Kavango areas, should oil be discovered there, has the ministry or the government in general perhaps looked into rewarding, even if it is just the traditional communities within those areas, or give them some sort of preference, given that oil is discovered within the area, so we do not have the case of the Niger Delta that eventually resulted in the militarization of these areas because of the uprising of those communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Okito Craig. I'm a journalist. I work for Republican and Namibia Media Holdings. Firstly, to Mr. Malunga, I'd like you to elaborate for us about the progress you've made in terms of downstream and how far you have progressed towards reclaiming your right to import half of the fuel into Namibia. Then I'd like to ask the lady from Petro's Fund, I'm sorry, I didn't remember your name, but my questions are just about the sources of income for the fund and the current strength of the fund. Thank you very much. I'd also like to ask the gentleman from Recon about, that would be Mr. Robert Mwanachilenga, about how you have treated farmers in the Kavango where you've already drilled your exploration holes, where court cases are pending, and considering that these farmers are not the most financially well-off people, those court cases are being led by the LAC, which is a Namibian institution which defends people who cannot defend themselves. Is that not an indication of what you think of Namibians in general and how you will treat us in the future? Also, I'd like to ask you about the distance that you would have to expect to move that oil if you do find it, and the environment you'd have to move it through, and what you would do to preserve that natural heritage, which should last us even after you are done. Then I'd like to ask Ms. Werner about her role at ExxonMobil, and if you could elaborate about what that company has done in terms of, renewable energy and moving away from fossil fuels. And finally, I'd like to ask Minister Tom Alwindo, Namibia has always been a rich country full of poor people. What makes you think that more money will mean a better life for most of us? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question. You were basically inquiring about how far NAMCO is with this downstream strategy, service stations, and the 50% mandate. So we've been very aggressive with our downstream strategy. We decided 3 years ago already to go into the service station sector because we realized that the margins, the profit margins there are much, much better than the traditional B2B business that we've been doing. So we went out on an aggressive service station building campaign. 3 years ago. Currently, we have 11 service stations that are operating on the NAMCO brand, and we have about 10 service stations that are on our books at various stages of construction. So by this time next year, we believe we'll have around 20 service stations that are operating, and our desire is to have about 33 service stations by 2024. And we're fortunate enough to be rolling out these service stations with our own balance sheet. I think we've become so strong. In the past, obviously, people thought that we will not be able to do it on our own. Hopefully, we can get to that number, but obviously the minister has to give us those licenses, the retail licenses, for us to get to that number. But we are confident that we can still find a niche in the market to be able to serve the customers with very good service stations with a local brand. As far as the 50% mandate is concerned, yeah, you very well know that this mandate was revoked in 2010 when we experienced problems with last supply of fuel. And so after that, about 2 years ago, we went back to the government basically to explain to them that we are now ready to resume this mandate to import 50% of the country's requirements. And the government gave us obviously the support and the approval. However, in the intervening time, there was the Competition Commission that came into existence, and then we had also to go to them to basically ask whether this is possible, whether they can allow us to basically import the country's 50% fuel requirements. But they found that to be anti-competitive, so we did not succeed. We said it's fine. Namibia currently sort of consumes about 100 million liters per month, right? So we told ourselves, no problem. We will not, fight with the Competition Commission. We believe in our own strengths, in our own capacity, and we said we would rather want to compete fairly in the market. We believe that at some point we will be able to import that amount of 50 million liters per month without having a mandate. About 5 years ago, we used to import about 7 million liters per month. But last month, we managed to import, in fact, not only import, but we managed to sell 50 million liters of fuel per month, which, if you do your calculations, is more or less 50% of the country's requirements. So we've managed to do that without a mandate. So we keep on growing, and we believe that we should rather grow like that instead of having to get mandates from government to import. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions.
Thank you.
One was the sources of income of the petrol fund, and the second one, the strength of the fund. The sources of income. Every company granted a license to explore for hydrocarbons negotiates with the government to make a contribution that enables the government to build capacity. Currently, there are 34 on our books petroleum exploration license holders, and each of those have a negotiated amount that they remit directly to the petrol fund. So that constitutes our source of income. In terms of strength, the Board of Trustees of the Petrol Fund adopted an income management policy ever since the fund was established, which requires us as the managers of the organization to invest all the funds that we receive and only use the interest portion to deploy towards our skills development. That policy has served us very well, which has left the fund fairly strong and be able to meet its mandate. Of course, when you are in the investment sector, it's another conversations that I can spend some time on. You are subject to market conditions because your interest depends on how the market behaves. And you will agree with me that the last 2 years, the financial markets were very poor as a result of COVID. You are pushing me to introduce that conversation, so I'll comment on it very briefly. So what we have done as the board is that the contributions that we receive in a financial year, for example, this year, should we have a shortfall in income, a certain percentage of what is contributed is remitted to our training fund. That enables us to continue training at the same pace that we would have budgeted as a trust fund. I hope I've answered your 2 questions.
How much?
Thank you. Let's not engage in, I think you can ask questions afterwards, maybe follow up, just to avoid dialogue.
Very much, the gentleman from the Republican. I think your questions are valid. And as responsible operators, People Africa operates on the ESG level. That's how we do business. E being the environment, that's the social part, and G the governance part. Yeah, you talked about the farmers and their concerns and the court cases. First of all, I must say that the farmers in the region are some of our most important stakeholders, and we have been engaging them all the time. Obviously, farmers are farmers, and anybody else, if you come to your yard, sir, and I start drilling in your yard, you'll be concerned, of course. Then you have questions. And these things have been raised, and everything is fine. We had meetings last week, and it all went well. The last 2 weeks, everything went well. With regards to lack in cases pending in the court, I'm sorry, those are under the court. I won't mention anything on them. Let's let it pass until the court cases are done. He also asked an important question about how we're going to move the oil, the gas, the environment. We are at this stage in drilling, so we need to find out what product we have there first. And then from there, the main product, and then we develop a development plan for that product, how to evacuate, be it crude oil or be it natural gas. Obviously, development plans, crude oil is always just on top pipeline or trucking or railway. That's one part. Gas is mainly changed into electrons, gas to power plant. So all those things are things we're going to look at after we make the discovery. Not if, but after we make that discovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bridget?
So I think the question directed at me was, what is ExxonMobil doing with respect to the energy transition? First of all, energy transition is a fact. The goal is to get to net zero by 2050, and companies such as ExxonMobil need to adapt to that new reality. We need to transition away from fossil fuels over the next several decades. And to do that, we're doing several things. First is we're aggressively reducing emissions in our own operations around the world, and we're also working with other companies to help them with reduction of their emissions. We're also trying to figure out ways to take the carbon out of hydrocarbons and how to capture the carbon out of the atmosphere. One of these techniques is called carbon capture and storage. This is a technology that ExxonMobil has employed in several fields in North America for the last number of decades. It basically involves capturing the CO2 emissions and then re-injecting them down deep below the surface of the earth. That's called carbon capture. Recently, ExxonMobil announced two major projects, one in the Gulf of Mexico and one in Rotterdam, working with all the industries around there to capture their carbon and store it safely. We're also spending billions of dollars a year in research figuring out how to take carbon out of the hydrocarbon. Certainly the minister has talked about green hydrogen as being an effort or initiative that you're embarking on in Namibia. One of the research elements that ExxonMobil is doing is something called blue hydrogen. It's where you take a carbon out of the hydrocarbon chain and use that remaining hydrogen to generate electricity. We're also spending research dollars on developing biofuels, things like lightweight plastics or no carbon plastics. So a significant amount of effort is being put into evolving our business to the new reality that's going to be happening over the coming decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. The gentleman.
So what I want to express, and if you tell me that I only have to ask one question, then it means that you are intimidating me psychologically. Thank you. Let me just start with the issue whether the farmer in Kavango. I'm coming from Kavango. I think Mwanachilenga, don't say that the farmers are in support. They even expressed on the 18th of June that they express their discontent the way you are conducting your activity in Kavango region. You would disregard them that if they are not human beings. That is what they express, because the government and Dragon Africa have put even the farmers, like the people are put on the gunpoint, where they cannot, they have only to say yes or no, otherwise they will be shot. That is how you are conducting your activity in Kavango. Let me just say. Coming to the question, the issue here is the government and Dragon Africa, and the government, especially the Ministry of Mines and Energy, choose the line of people of Kavango over money. That is really, to me, I can just say that is very much irresponsible government that choose life of people over money without considering the life. Because when the minister talked, he only talked of the impact on the economy. He did not even mention how it will impact the livelihood of the people. And after destruction of their farming land, then the people of Kavango have to live on, hand government, hand out, and then later you will say those people are poor, those people are lazy. Coming to water contamination, you mentioned that you have to casing that will prevent from contamination of the leakage. Do you want to say that whether it ends, will you put also that they will not, that open, the well itself, where you will abstract the oil and gas? How will you cover it where it ends there, at the bottom there? It's impossible to say that it will be prevented. That is not true. And when we talk of the wells, that will go more than 3,000 meter deep. Now, the borehole will dry up, and who will be responsible for that one? That one is obvious, the borehole will dry up. And who is responsible for that? And say to say that the government or whoever or the people are ready with the exploration of the oil and gas. But I heard from the welcoming remark that the Namibian Perspective are trying to accommodate causes in, meaning they not yet, the causes are not yet offered. And when we tell people the consultation, it was disregard from the beginning that people of Kavango were not even consulted, even the communities, because they only see, even when you are invading the farms, people just see people coming in their farm without even proper prayer consultation. How do you say that people are consulted when you put people at the gunpoint? Yes, and then when we talk of a strong institution that monitors, I think it was mentioned by the Minister of Mines. I think that people have ways, and even we also even present and submit our objections, and even highlighting how Reckon Africa violated even the very legislations of Namibia, but it has been put just in the deaf air. We have to submit our objections, and we even highlighted what they have violated: the environmental laws, the Land Reform Act laws, and also all the policy which is of the Namibian is being violated. We highlighted it, but the government just put it as. I thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a gentleman, yes, the gentleman with the shades on the head. Then there was.
I have my hand up to you, sorry.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity.
Let us identify and then so that it might move on. The gentleman, the lady who's holding the mic.
I think the Reckon Africa case is a really good example of how Namibian people are going to be treated throughout the investment opportunities that we get. At the end of the day, we're the ones that will be losing out. I mean, what worries me the most is what Bridget said about in order to find successful wells, you will have to drill about up to 34 wells. I'm just wondering, Reckon is exploring onshore in both Kavango East and West region. So we have already had issues whereby Reckon Africa has confiscated people from their access to land illegally and also doing seismic surveys through people's Mahango fields and never compensated any of those people for anything. So now I'm wondering, this is going to be a large-scale, destruction of people's lives and livelihoods. What are we, how are we going to ensure that the people, together with the oil exploration that's going to take place, or that's already taking place, that they live, hand in hand and nobody loses out and nobody, because we are looking at people having to leave that area, lots of people having to leave that area and move into urban areas, in squatter camps, which we, at the end of the day, cannot really maintain. And I just don't understand why our government decided to sign the Paris Agreement if we were unhappy with the terms that were in the agreement, and then at the end of the day turn around and do exactly the opposite. I mean, how do you justify that? I thought that it would be good for us to stick to all these agreements because we are the hotspot of global warming. The global warming will bring with it drought, and Namibia is the driest country in sub-Saharan Africa, so we are in the middle of the global warming crisis. I don't understand why we are not making sure that we don't, participate or contribute to global warming by investing in the gas and oil industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have the gentleman?
Okay, my name is Christopher Kulashike. I've been involved in the oil and gas industry, drilling offshore, onshore, with Recon Africa project and all over. I just have a suggestion of trying to help two institutions, the Polytechnic of Namibia and University of Arts, UNAM. These guys, they produce very, sorry, NUST and I'm a vocational training person. But anyway, the University of UNAM and NUST. We have a problem when these guys graduate with their degrees and honors. The problem is that the guys cannot work with hands. The guys do not even know the basic hand tools. So this is I'm from a company. So you find an engineer. You find an engineer from Polytechnic, wherever he's from Germany or from Sweden. Then you take our engineers, then you find out that this guy can do more practical. Why is these guys cannot do this practical work? What is actually going on? So, what my suggestion is that the help is that we should put these guys to work. Because if you want to enter the whole industry, it's not going to be these things of you sitting in the computer. You have to be the practical.
Thank you very much.
We need to give these guys practical.
Thank you.
Hi. Okay. I just have one question. With Namibia being water insecure, in the process of drilling requiring a lot of water, a large amount of water, how do you plan on ensuring that Namibia does not dry out?
Two principal issues with regard to the issue of Recon Africa doing the wrong things. The only thing I want, again, just to reiterate is this. We do have an environmental management act that has to be followed. If the argument is that Recon Africa did something wrong and they didn't follow the law, the issue is not then with Recon Africa. If then for government people who have approved it. But I have been assured if it's about the water permit, the water permit has been given by the minister that is responsible for the water permit. Are we now trying to say they are not good enough and therefore they don't know what they did, they just simply did that? Who you want to say you are the specialist, you know more than what the specialist people who have done and say that's what it is? So that's the principle to say, yes, there is a process that has to be followed rigorously. And if they haven't followed that, then it looks like let's investigate as to how did they get to do that. The other principle is this, with regard to the farmers. Again, the principle says Recon Africa has to consult with the farmers and have an agreement. If you say that agreement wasn't reached and they simply went on somebody's farm, I guess that's why they are probably in the courts, and probably the court will then pronounce itself. There is a process of discussion to agree. If you are saying somebody was taken from their land without compensation, again, that is not what the principle is supposed to be. If you are going to replace somebody from their land which they used, then obviously there must be compensation. That's what it is. And really, that's all what I want to say. With regard to the, why we're doing this, I have already explained myself. I am more concerned about the livelihood of the Namibians. I am more concerned about the fact that we don't have energy, while at the same time, we are producing renewable energy that actually will be a zero net zero position which we are going to be in. And with regard us facing out this, I want to be given a chance to do that at a much more slower pace than other people because they have already reached where we need to reach. If they didn't, they weren't going to insist on this. They weren't going to do that. Why do you think Germany suddenly says we want to reopen our coal plant? Why? Simply because they find themselves in a situation where it's unbearable. And for me, our livelihood of our people are more unbearable. While I'm aware of the climate change, I need to exploit this resource to make sure that I put the people in the position to be able to deal with the transition issues. That's really my position, that's the government's position. To say it's not a contradiction, it's something that is much more urgent. And mind you, the climate change people are arguing about. Africa contributes less than 2% to that problem. It's the developed countries that actually have polluted the text. Because we suffer these floods or the drought, it's not because the pollution was in Namibia. It's because the pollution was everywhere in Europe and America. It's in the atmosphere. So now for you to argue honestly to say, let's leave that resource, and therefore let's quickly embrace the renewable, I think you're really doing yourself a disservice. But I do agree that we have to do with the due care in terms of how we manage this environment. And I also agree to say, let's make sure that the resource that we are going to get, the revenue that we're going to get, is going to the transparency issue I was talking about. That's, I think, where we have to have a conversation. And the gentleman said, give me your assurance about we as whether as political leaders or corporate leaders or traditional leaders. I want to read something to you, which just an answer. There's somebody who wrote to say, when you choose your leaders with wisdom and forethought. Because we all choose our leaders, right? Except traditional leaders, maybe pushes their accession. It's not. But it says, we choose your leaders with wisdom and forethought. And it says, to be led by a coward is to be controlled by all that the coward fears. To be led by a fool is to be led by the opportunists who control the fool. To be led by a thief is to offer up your most precious treasures to be stolen. To be led by a liar is to ask to be told lies. To be led by a tyrant is to sell yourself and those you love into slavery. So just let's make sure that what we need to do, we got the right people to do what needs to be done. But to honestly say, let's not do this because we fear it's going to be a curse, we have already given up. Let's not give up. Let's insist that this thing must be done in a very transparent manner to make sure that the resource goes to where it's supposed to go. And I think really that's what we should start to think. And it should not be a curse at all. It should be a blessing for all of us. But those are some of the things that we need to start actually doing and think about how we can do that.
Right. So in exploration operations, you use water for drilling your wells. It's part of the drilling mud. In my experience, you typically use maybe 1 to 2 swimming pool sizes of water for drilling one particular well. And often you recycle that drilling mud for next well operation. So you don't throw that drilling mud away. You save it, you store it, and you reuse it. So the water usage in actual drilling is not a huge percentage of what the needs of the local population are for water supply. The other aspect of oil and gas operations that uses water is something that's called fracking. Now, I'm not aware of that. That is done when you have what's called an unconventional resource, so it's a really tight reservoir. I'm not aware that that is anything that is being explored for in Namibia. Certainly in the offshore, there's no economics at all to do fracking in offshore wells. So that's something that will never happen. I can guarantee that. On the onshore is where you tend to find unconventionals. But as far as my knowledge of the geology of the Kavango region, there doesn't appear to be that type of resource there. It's the more conventional where you don't do fracking and you don't need to do fracking.
Just as a point, Honorable Minister, thank you very much for such a forum, because I think it's good that our people understand what's happening, and they are done with genuine questions. I mean, it's from their genuine hearts, which is very good. However, my experience in the Kavango region and the time I've worked for Recon there, I've seen that it was really lack of proper information about what drilling is. We're a mining country, and mining is well known, but oil and gas is not so well known. And given the understanding of about a year ago, in what the people now think is day and night, people had an idea of the wrong things. We've communicated with them, we've spoken with them. They now understand. And not to make a long story short, not to make it too long. If we can, okay, water is, she has already explained, that's not a problem. And there is a sealing of water of the aquifers. We're going 3 kilometers down. So whatever we find in the middle, we seal it, completely sealed. If we are going to be producing, if our neighbors produce oil and gas very close to us, Angola, onshore, Kwanza, if the Mozambicans produce oil and gas, then Temane and Mande field, for 30 years they've been producing. What should we fail in Namibia? I think we should look into it at that aspect. The technology is there, and everything is good enough for drilling and production in this country. And I don't see any issue, honestly. And I tend to differ in most of these points, but it's good that you raise them so that we can try to educate and talk together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Monachilanga, if I can just, there was a question about how many students and any additional if there is.
I'll just comment on it. Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Monachilanga is right that Recon Africa has offered 10 scholarships to candidates that are coming from the Kavango East and the Kavango West region. This commitment to fund these students is for until they complete their studies. And the funding commitment is 1.2 million Namibian dollars every year. And we have entered into a partnership with Recon Africa, where Petrofund manages the Recon Africa Scholarship Program. So over and above the number of students that I've mentioned that are on this Petrofund Scholarship Program, that are 88 this year, another 10 is funded by Recon Africa. So there are a total of, if you like, 98 students that are funded by the oil and gas industry in Namibia at the moment. So the 10 students are currently at the University of Namibia as well as at NUST, and they are fully funded by Recon Africa. Now, this is over and above the obligations that they already have, because according to the Petroleum Act, they are still required to make a contribution to the petrol fund. So they make the contribution to the petrol fund. Over and above, they also have set up a scholarship program dedicated for candidates coming from the two regions. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to again thank the organizers of this event for facilitating these kind of conversations. Because it's through these conversations that we start understanding the oil industry, the impact of the oil industry to our economy, to our various regions as well. So I think from NAMCO's side, we will continue to participate, to engage with everybody, to make sure that we are on the same wavelength. Because oil and gas is a big thing. These discoveries that have been made are big. Recon Africa is doing a great job onshore drilling 4 wells. Not only drilling 4 wells, I mean, they've done a lot in terms of drilling water wells as well. 22 water wells, so that's not a small matter. So I think we should, as Namibians, also be appreciative of some of these efforts. Not only that, I'm sure there's a lot of people from the Kavango regions that have been employed. I don't know, but how many people? More than 500 people that have received employment. So this would not have been possible if there was no oil and gas exploration in the Kavango region. So I think let's continue the engagements and the conversations. Oil and gas is going to have a positive impact on Namibia, no doubt. And I think we will decide, as the minister said, we will have to make the decision whether it's going to be positive or a negative impact on the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the platform once again. I'd like to echo Lunga that these platforms are indeed relevant because they offer us as stakeholders to share information and also address questions. I also want to use this platform to invite those that are interested in scholarship opportunities around the skills that I've mentioned, that we will, as of next month, where am I already in July? Sometime in July, we will start promoting the scholarships that we are going to offer next year. So I encourage you to visit our website, encourage you to read the press so that you find out what scholarships we plan to roll out next year, and you are very welcome to apply. Now, I also want to comment on the fact that these scholarships that we offer, they are for all Namibians, everybody, all Namibians. We appreciate that resources can be found in one part of the country, but there are resources for Namibians. When I eat fish that come from offshore, I don't ask myself, should I eat it or not? Because it comes from offshore Namibia, right? When I am enjoying resources that are coming from taxation out of the diamond industry, I don't ask where it comes from. I enjoy it as a Namibian. So I encourage all of you to invite all those Namibians that are interested in the oil and gas industry to apply for the scholarships.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, once again, it cannot be overemphasized that such engagements are important so that people can understand what the industry is about. We saw it as a company in Kavango, where we started. There was a lot of resistance. And now I can tell you that we are in agreement with most things with the farmers and all our other stakeholders there. It's a question of education, and it's very important that we do it. Shabonali, I can simply say that oil and gas can exist with farming, with fishing, and other industries. Thank you.
I would just like to say that I'm very impressed with this evening. I'd really like to congratulate NUST at setting up this forum. The turnout tonight obviously shows the need for the thirst for engagement and dialogue. I think it's going to be an exciting series that you're going to have over the coming year, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate.
I just want to finish off by saying things do happen only when people make them happen. Nothing happens by itself. And I am quite encouraged, the young people who are interested with our economy, because sometimes the impression is always created that all the young people are not interested, they are only on social media doing all sorts of other stuff, but actually there are people who are interested in terms of where are we going. But as I say, things are only going to change if we make them to change. And I would also want to encourage all of us to always think that the glass is half full and not always half empty. Because if you really think that the glass somehow, yes, there are problems, and we are asking all these questions because you want to have solutions. And I hope that's all what we all want. I'm asking a question because I really don't understand, and if you really explain to me, I'll also be in a position to make a better contribution to what needs to be done because now I do understand. And therefore, I will want to encourage you to continue to ask those questions. There should not be a question that is too difficult to ask or too sensitive to ask. Ask the questions. And those who have to answer the question need to answer the questions. If I don't have the answer today, I should also be able to say, I don't know the answer. I will go and find out what the answer is. But I really just want to say it was great that we started this conversation. It's a new sector we have got. And as a ministry also, we have started also going to the region to start also to explain to the people what it is, what it could mean, and also to evolve, to avail that opportunity for people to really start asking those questions, and as an information, as a learning experience. And as I said, we are all going through that as the first time, but really, let's continue to ask the questions and also thinking that the glass is half full and not half empty.